The Panama Canal made a handful of men staggeringly rich, and it wasn't the engineer. We're taught that Ferdinand de Lesseps built the Suez Canal, then tried to build Panama, failed spectacularly and went bankrupt. Clean narrative, cause and effect. Except that's the version told by the people who made money off his failure. De Lesseps wasn't incompetent, he was undermined. The man who actually finished the Panama Canal, John Stevens, walked in after de Lesseps's company collapsed and inherited a graveyard of abandoned equipment, dead workers and yellow fever wards. What he found was gold. Here's the actual story. De Lesseps raised 1.4 billion francs from French investors between 1881 and 1889. Most of that money vanished, not into the canal, into the pockets of land speculators, corrupt officials and shell companies. The canal work was almost secondary. When the French operation collapsed, the United States saw an opening. Theodore Roosevelt wanted a canal. Congress wanted strategic control, but here's where incentives became visible. The American government didn't build it themselves. They bought the rights from a French holding company for $40 million. That $40 million didn't go to reimburse French investors. It went to a small group of American speculators who'd quietly bought up the French company's shares at pennies on the dollar. They knew the US would eventually need a canal. They were right. They became millionaires overnight. John Stevens arrived in 1905. He didn't build the canal through genius alone, he built it through ruthlessness and organization. He fired corrupt contractors, imported thousands of workers, and most crucially, he solved the yellow fever problem. Mosquitoes killed more men than any engineering challenge. The canal opened in 1914. It cut the journey from New York to San Francisco by 8,000 miles. Suddenly, ships didn't have to sail around Cape Horn. Shipping costs plummeted. Trade patterns shifted overnight. Nations that controlled the canal controlled the valve on global commerce. But here's what historians skip. The wealth created by the canal didn't flow to Panama. It flowed to whoever could move goods through it fastest and cheapest. Shipping companies, commodity brokers, the traders who understood that a 40-day voyage could now be done in 15. Consider copper. Before the canal, Chilean copper took 60 days to reach eastern markets. After 20 days, that meant lower storage costs, faster capital turnover, and a price collapse that made copper mining suddenly unprofitable for smaller operators. The canal didn't create wealth equally, it concentrated it. The real beneficiaries weren't engineers or visionaries. They were speculators who understood that infrastructure changes create winners and losers. Someone bought shipping stocks before the canal opened. Someone else shorted way-loyal companies that depended on long-haul trade routes. The incentives were visible to anyone paying attention. Panama itself. The canal runs through Panamanian territory, but for decades the US controlled it. Panama didn't gain full sovereignty until 1999. For most of the 20th century, the wealth flowed north. A nation sat atop a global choke point and saw almost none of the profits. Today, the canal generates $3 billion annually for Panama, but that's recent. For 85 years, it was a tool of American strategic power. The lesson isn't about engineering or ambition. It's about who controls the infrastructure that moves value. That's where the real fortunes live. The canal's legacy is this: massive infrastructure projects create asymmetric wealth. The people who build them often go broke or get forgotten. The people who understand what they'll change before they are finished, they become dynasties. De Lesseps dreamed, Stevens engineered, but the speculators who saw the future, they wrote the checks that wrote history. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research. Subscribe to see how the next infrastructure project reshapes global wealth. We break down the mechanics of how fortunes are built before the public even knows what's happening. Subscribe to see how the next infrastructure project reshapes global wealth. We break down the mechanics of how fortunes are built before the public even knows what's happening. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research.